Hello everybody, welcome to the Getronics filmed webinar series. This is webinar number 1, where we'll be looking at Office 365. My name is Tony Cox. I am a business consultant based in the Getronics international team, and joining me later on to talk about some of our internal experiences is Carl Dillo, our head of workspace. And Carl will be taking you through how Getronics can help you with your Office 365 deployments and some of our experiences with existing customers and with our own internal deployment. So before we continue though, I think it's probably a good idea just to give you a quick snapshot of who we are at Getronics. We're a global provider of workspace solutions based in 18 countries around the world. We then are able to provide services through partners in up to 90 different countries in 22 different languages, and our ability to do 24/7 follow the sun support through our 5 global service centers, which we'll touch on in this slide. So this slide simply shows you where the service centers are and what their specializations are from the point of view of the number of countries that they support and the sort of languages that they can do. We also have a number of network operations centers as well. I guess from here, the kind of standout statistic is the number of users that we currently support, roughly about 1.5 million users, who generate about 3.6 million tickets per year. So we have this kind of high volume ticket, global kind of presence, and then we can do this sort of thing also in the Office 365 sphere, which we'll kind of go back to and talk about now. Also as well, you're probably asking who are these guys and how do they kind of relate to Microsoft. So we've been a Microsoft partner for about 30 years. We've been certified, gold certified in a number of different areas for the last 15. We have about 200 engineers worldwide who hold a number of Microsoft certifications to allow us to get to the certified gold and silver competencies. Plus we have an MVP in the form of Nico Senhart, who's based out of Belgium. He's our innovation manager, and you'll hear Nico speak in webinars 2 and 3 when he talks about Windows 10 and EMS. I guess the kind of key point from this slide really is the last bit at the bottom right hand corner, where we really want to emphasize the fact that we're able to offer this support for things like Office 365 in very complex global deployments, regardless of where you are on the planet. So our ability to reach you globally is not to be underestimated. So in this webinar, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about Office 365 in no particular order. We've already covered off who we are at Getronics, so we'll talk about some of the business benefits, why you should think about Office 365 if you haven't already done so, how we can support your move, what does that mean from a kind of the way that organizations are positioned around the globe, as I've already mentioned, and how can we unlock some of those unused elements of Office 365. Lots of people buy some of the SKUs like E3, for example, and only deploy parts of it. So how can you kind of unlock the value in the rest of your subscription? So I guess the first question is, why Office 365? What you've seen is, and we'll kind of talk in more detail on the next slide as well, but what you've seen, certainly in the marketplace, a number of major trends, and one of them, which I think we should need to pick out, is this idea of the consumerization of IT. The people use tools in a home environment, and they come into the workspace, and in many cases now have a more up-to-date IT estate in their own home than when they come into the office. So people's expectations about what IT can do and the flexibility that it provides for them has changed significantly, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years. And related to that is we're seeing large numbers of people operate or work from more than one location. So the office tends to be now wherever you currently are, whether it's in a cafe or working from home or working for a customer site or in the headquarters or where your organization is based. So there's a very different attitude to work, and work being somewhere, or work being something you do rather than somewhere you go. Also the familiarity of and again this relates to the consumerization piece. Over 1 billion people using Office, a large proportion of that are those people using it in the consumer space. And now, because Microsoft provide it as a subscription service, you can buy it on a kind of monthly basis, and then it gives people access to the kind of tools which they use in the office, or they could use in the office at home. So kind of pushing everything through to kind of one space. Also as well, the momentum that Microsoft's beginning to see with Office 365. So 75% of all Fortune 500 companies having some element of a Microsoft cloud service, be that Office 365 or Azure. We're also seeing a number of pressures, as we talked about, coming onto businesses today, really in a number of different areas. We're not going to focus on all of these, we'll just kind of pick out a few pointers. We mentioned earlier on a kind of big shift to mobile working, and this idea that work being something you do rather than somewhere you go. And so, lots of organizations allowing people to use their own personal devices, be they laptops or tablets or mobile phones of some kind, but only a much smaller number, only a small proportion of those, or a smaller proportion of those, having some kind of policy, some kind of technology in place to be able to manage that. And when Nico later on in webinar 3 talks about the Enterprise Mobility Suite, he'll kind of focus in on that area. We're also seeing a growth in regulation as well. So far more, especially across Europe with kind of very different privacy laws and those sorts of things. So we're seeing those kind of things and users all fessing up to breaking some of those compliancy laws either accidentally or on purpose. Lots of people beginning to wanting to use kind of social networking tools or tools they're familiar with in the social networking space in the workspace rather than just simply email. And also as well, we've seen a huge growth in the kind of volume of data that people have to tackle these days. So there's kind of that whole, how do you store all these documents and content that we can access easily later on. But when we begin to look at Office 365 specifically, I guess the key thing to remember here is that Office 365 is a brand. And under that brand, Microsoft has placed cloud versions of their big ticket items. And funnily enough, and this is where some people get confused, you can purchase Office 365 without actually purchasing Office, which might seem a bit strange, but it's the idea to make a distinction between Office the product and Office 365 the brand. But within that, under that 365 umbrella, there are kind of four big items. As I mentioned earlier on, Office, which they call in this case Office 365 Pro Plus, that's your traditional Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, and you can buy that as a subscription service on a monthly basis. Interestingly and related to that is a big item in and of itself, which is SharePoint Online. So most organizations have spent a lot of time and effort building SharePoint infrastructures, but now you don't have to. That SharePoint infrastructure has already been built for you in the Office 365 cloud. All you then have to do is take advantage of it, and we can help you in those areas. We'll talk a bit more detail with that in a second. My favorite topic, which is Skype for Business, used to be called Link. This ability to provide conferencing and telephony and presence services directly into the desktop or integrated directly into the desktop, moving away from the idea of having a fixed desk phone. One of the things that we've seen more recently with the Skype for Business is this ability, or Microsoft are making announcements about the ability to break into the PSTN directly from the Office 365 cloud rather than having to deploy some part of that functionality on premise, which then breaks out into the PSTN. So we're seeing some changes there, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later on. And another area we're seeing most people concentrate, especially in the enterprise space with Office 365, is around Exchange Online. And this ability of taking your email and migrating it up into the cloud and never having to do another email migration again. Most IT people are probably dancing up and down saying, fantastic, where do I sign up? Because one of the things IT people don't traditionally want to do is migrate email because it causes them a huge headache if something goes wrong. And now we can take one step with us, move your email into the cloud, get 50 gig mailboxes for everybody, which is another issue that we've seen in the past where people have problems with their email inbox bloat, and now you can get away with those things because 50 gig is going to be enough for most people. And then, of course, never having to worry about an email migration again. And we'll talk about a little bit more about the kinds of things we can do in a second as well. So again, I'm not going to kind of talk to every single point on this, but there are some things I just want to mention. We'll go back to mobility again. Organizations in the past have spent a lot of money and effort and time allowing their users to access content regardless of where they are. Now, of course, because that content has been stored behind a firewall inside an organization, inside a building, somewhere on an industrial estate, that has often been a complicated thing to do. Now, of course, because of moving to the cloud with Office 365, by design, you can access this content from anywhere, allowing you to have that much more flexible approach to the way people can work. We've seen much better uptime from the cloud now, so we can provide 99.9% uptime of your services regardless of where you are. And again, that's been a challenge before, sometimes for even people doing that kind of stuff on premise. The ability to remove that hardware estate that you would normally have inside your organization to allow you to kind of reduce the organizational carbon footprint. And although not directly related to this notion of evergreening, where you are always going to be on the latest version. So again, it allows or gets organizations into a position whereby rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to upgrade every 3 to 4 years, and in some cases, as Microsoft has noticed, and other organizations that people version skip, you don't have to do that anymore. Because the latest version will always be available to you, and it will be introduced in much more incremental ways rather than the 3 or 4 year big hit that we've seen in the past. And also the change in licensing as well, moving from a CapEx-based model to a subscription-based OpEx model, a change in the cost flow. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't buy Office 365 in large lumps if you want to, but there's also the option to do both kinds of operational model. So what can we do for you? So This slide just kind of picks out a few areas. It isn't every single thing we can do, just to kind of highlight some of the kind of key things. The great thing about Office 365 Pro Plus, for example, is its ability to run 2016 alongside 2013, for example, so you can do testing, getting users used to the new version. We can help you with that. We can integrate all that kind of login type details through our own AD infrastructure and with Azure, for example. We pull out SharePoint particularly here because, again, this is a huge topic on its own. And we could talk specifically about SharePoint, but there's a number of areas we can help you with that. So we'll talk about application development again in a bit later on because we can help you with those ideas. But where do you start with Office 365 SharePoint Online? Is it the content migration? Is it developing your intranet site, or in some cases your internet site? Maybe it might be workflow or document management. So these are all areas we can help you migrate content, build applications, and build kind of workflow and processes around those. With Skype for Business, for example, we've helped a lot of customers build out both a on-premise and cloud-based Link and Skype for Business solution, so the ability to position the PBX functionality, the integration into the PSTN on-site, but have the rest of the functionality up in the cloud if you want to. And there's going to be loads more kind of hybrid-based scenarios that Microsoft are going to come down the line with as Skype for Business develops in the cloud. And we can help you with that migration, the network readiness, because don't forget, even though things are up in the cloud, for example, you're still going to need to look at your network and whether or not that's ready to carry voice and video traffic, for example. And then probably the most important one, certainly probably in the kind of near term for most people, is taking your current email base, all those inboxes, and move those into the cloud. Or if you want to, split them and have some kind of hybrid scenario. So you've got some mailboxes sat in the cloud and some mailboxes sat on site. And we can help you with that migration task using kind of standardized tools and standardized processes, and then support you afterwards as you go down that road. So again, just to kind of highlight a few things. So we can integrate this whole thing as a complete service and then integrate it into the service desk and all the other service things we can do. There's obviously all the hybrid models, which we've just spoken about, with the on-prem and cloud, or a mixture of the two we're beginning to see now. As I mentioned earlier on, our experience really is in that kind of complex, multinational type deployment where it's not just a single site or a single location. There's locations scattered across the globe, and we can do that follow the sun support for those type of environments. We can do those through, and we can help you on that task, on that road, with alignment workshops, and we can help you really kind of whatever your platform is. Because one of the great things about 365 now, particularly at the front end, is that Microsoft's become very device agnostic. Although it would like you to use Windows, if you've got iPads or Macs of any kind or Android devices, Microsoft really doesn't mind. And has provided Office on all those different platforms, be they desk-based or mobile-based. So how do you buy Office 365? What's really interesting in the way Microsoft have built out the Office 365 SKUs is they've positioned a number of SKUs with different target markets. So you have Office 365 SKUs designed specifically for students and education. You have them specifically designed for the consumer market. And you have a number of SKUs which have been designed specifically for kind of mid-market, kind of small business space. Probably where you're interested, and certainly where our interest is around those customers who are buying what they call the enterprise SKUs. And Microsoft have named them, E1, E3, E4. Interestingly enough, there's never been an E2, so it'd be interesting to see whatever happened to E2. But anyway, so with E1, where we're really looking there is really in those scenarios where you have users that maybe don't have a fixed desk. So it's browser-based, email, a bit of document sharing, the inclusion of Yammer for things like the social networking tools, and priced, as you can see here, at £5 sterling or €6.70 per user per month. Stepping up from that, and where we see there, the difference between E1 and E3 is the inclusion of the full Office suite, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. And that means there's a significant change in price as well. It also includes a number of things around Skype, so there's ability to do conferencing, internal person-to-person voice calls, multi-party calls, that sort of thing. And the ability as well to kind of bridge conferencing if you want to include those kind of things too. And then lastly, E4, which is the inclusion of the breakout onto the PSTN through the inclusion of what Microsoft calls the PlusCal historically, but that's just included in the E4 suite. As of recording of this webinar, here in late November, Microsoft has announced they're going to release a new SKU on December the 1st called E5. When we get to the Q&A if you're watching this live, we'll then be able to talk about E5 and a few more details. But currently, as of today, as we are near towards the end of November, we don't have any more details around E5 other than it's E4 with a whole load of new bells and whistles, particularly around cloud PBX and PSTN and a whole number of other things. A lot of this functionality has been available in the on-prem versions of things like Exchange, for example, but Microsoft's been very keen to have parity between the cloud version and the on-premise version, so the inclusion of this new functionality brings that closer together. When we get to the webinar on the 10th of December, we'll have some more information about pricing and how we might go and then deploy it and help you go and deploy it. But at the moment, we've seen some announcements and we'll come back to that later on. So what's new in Office 365? What are some of the new bits of functionality and what's coming in the future? What can you look forward to? So I guess the big ticket item, I guess the big thing we've seen is the release of Office 2016. So there's a brand new version of Outlook, PowerPoint and Excel and Word, which is, if you're an Office 365 customer today, you have access to. Interestingly enough, Microsoft released the Mac version of this before the Windows version. So again, showing Microsoft's rather more agnostic approach to the way it delivers its Office suite to customers. There's two other interesting things in there probably are worth mentioning. One is Sway, which is a new presentation tool for kind of online creation of presentations, and Delve, which is Microsoft's content discovery and search tool that you have as part of the Office 365 suite. Some of the things you can look forward to, and you'll be seeing Microsoft make some announcements, certainly post the announcement around E5 and into the new year. Things like cloud-based telephony. So today you understand the concept of making telephone calls from Skype and bridging onto the PSTN, and now with Skype for Business, you're providing that. Some of the early testing will probably be in the US, and we'll see it move into Europe over the next 18-24 months. The other thing that Microsoft were asked to do is allow you to do large one-to-many broadcasts. So rather than being limited by the number of people you could squeeze into a traditional conference call, to be able to do single one-way one-to-many casts. So that's kind of like idea of broadcast meetings. That's coming along. That's coming down the line using Azure Media Services to provide that. And probably hot off the press, the thing we've seen announced in the last couple of weeks is 2 new data centers, one in Germany and one in the UK. So what can we specifically do, just to kind of highlight some of the things that we can specifically do at Getronics to help you on that journey with Office 365, even if you've got Office 365 today and are looking at how to make the most of what you've got, or you're thinking about migrating and moving to Office 365. I guess to emphasize the fact that we come from a background of break fix and desk side support. So again, that's not going to go away just because you've moved to Office 365. You're still going to need those kind of environments because things still break. Our multiple service desk approach, allowing us to deliver 24/7 follow the sun support, and some of the other more consultancy related things we can talk about, roadmaps, the consultancy required to be able to get you from where you are today to where you want to go, and this idea of onshore and nearshore application development, so taking applications that are currently sat somewhere and then moving them into the cloud, either on the Azure platform or linking and integrating them into Office 365. What I'd like to do now is hand over to my colleague Carl, who's going to talk to you some more detail about the sort of things we can do and some of our experience with some of our internal with some of our customers and our own internal deployment. So over to you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So obviously we've been working with a number of sectors with Office 365 already. Just want to draw out some of the key points that we've been focusing on, as well as across the whole support piece with Office 365. We're obviously doing a lot of consultancy-led migration, hybridization, and also our apps development and remediation services. The hybrid Skype offer at the moment, it might be going out when the E5 SKU is announced with the breakout from the cloud directly to the PSTN. But as it stands at the moment, hybrid Skype is the only way of connecting your enterprise to the enterprise voice capabilities and actually making external calls. So that's been a key feature for a number of our customers. We've also done a number of email, Skype and SharePoint migrations to the cloud, both from traditional on-premise Microsoft-centric solutions and also Lotus Notes based solutions. Our apps area has some SharePoint specialists that are working on developing rich content and workflow rather than leaving customers just using SharePoint as a file store, which we found in a number of cases. Our applications development area are looking at the legacy Office scripts and VBA code and stuff like that, bringing some of that up to date, ready to move across to the Office 2016 platform on Office 365. They're also engineering integration with the Cloud Office apps, because some of the ways that the internal processes and applications integrate with Office changes with the click-to-run versions of the package. And we're also developing a number of desktop and mobile applications which will integrate with the Office 365 and cloud services, as well as running things instead of the traditional services. What our primary aim is with these, the Office 365 engagement, is to try and maximise your investment. There's obviously a subscription involved. We want you to take full advantage of that subscription and get rid of any shelfware and things that you just haven't taken advantage of yet. And we're really keen for you to let us know how we can help. That just leaves us to a question and answer session. Thank you very much.